Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And we have an interesting show for you this evening. First up, we have Karen Brard is going to come on. She's going to be talking about the UFO Congress, and you'll see why in just a minute. There's just a little bit of an announcement to make. So I'll be bringing her in just a couple of minutes. And also our main guest is Don Heiden, someone alerted me to a guy that's kind of like in the same profession that I'm in, the antiques and art world. Yet when he was out metal detecting back in around 1989, 1990, somewhere around there, he saw a UFO that changed his life. He's talked about it with family and friends for years. And then he sees David Fravor's account for what he claims he saw and discovered that it was identical to what he saw, the Tic Tac type of thing. We're going to be talking about that. So he'll be on just after Karen. This week, we have a blog that Charles Lear wrote, like always, and it's UFOs and Missing Soldiers in the Gulf Breeze, Florida. Now, I never heard about the missing soldiers, so it should be, that's a fascinating blog, and check that out. And I want to thank everyone that helps out with the show, and anyone can do that. All you have to do is go over to podcastufo.com. You can see our Patreon page is linked at the top of the show. At the page. And every week we're right here live. Next week we're going to be with both Mark D'Antonio and Ted Rowe. That should be an interesting show. The first time those two guys are ever going to be talking on the same show together. But Ted Rowe has some very interesting news to talk about that involves NASA and NARCAP. So check that out. Come next week for sure. It's going to be a good show. For now, I'm bringing in Karen. Hi, Karen.
Hi,
nice
Martin.
to see you.
Good to see you too. It's been a long time.
It has been way too long. I think it was at Lee Spiegel's wedding.
Yes, it was. That was so fun. I had a great time.
Yeah, that was a blast. Yes. So Karen, the UFO Congress. Now you've owned that for what, 3 years?
2017.
Yeah, 2017. Okay, I remember that. And we were all excited, just all ready to buy tickets. And I contacted you and So now I'm going to put it in your lap.
Yeah, what a horrible year and a half we've had. And it was just getting to the point where the COVID cases were increasing again and people with vaccines were even getting it. And I was having a lot of people calling to cancel. And normally we don't do cancellations after a certain amount of time. Yeah. Because we've already put out money to all the different things that we have to pay ahead of time. But because of COVID, I really felt I can't not give people refunds. But at the rate that I was getting refunds, it was like 10% of the people had already canceled. So I was like, if this continues by the time of the conference, I would have not enough people there to, have the conference. So it was a safety and a business decision that I had to make, unfortunately. But the good news is that we can still do it virtually. And we still have all our great speakers. One of them had to decline, but, and for $99 until this Sunday night at midnight, it's only $99. You get over 20 speakers and panels. And we've done it before.
Yeah, last year I helped out last year.
That's
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I do. There was a great I'm trying to remember the service you used where people.
Huva.
Oh, okay. But all these people were like chatting in the back, and they were all having their own little chat rooms, and it was a lot of fun. I was surprised.
Yeah, it makes it more like a real conference. It's called Huva. We've done it last year. It's a very dependable platform. We had no issues last year. Went very smoothly. And once you get a ticket, you log into, when the conference is about to start, you log into Huva. And then you can see all the other attendees. If they want to upload their pictures, you can even see what they look like. You can talk to them. You can make virtual meetups. You can make chat rooms, all sorts of things. You can just make all sorts of things. And then once the speakers, when they're up, you'll see it. You'll go to the schedule, decide what you want to see, click on that, and they'll be right there in front of you. You can ask questions by typing in your question. And it's as close to being at a real conference as you can get.
Right. And let's talk about the speakers, because everyone always wants to know that. Who do we have for speakers this year?
Well, one of our speakers is Avi Loeb, who
Yep.
a lot of you probably have heard of. He was the Harvard scientist who had a book out about a year ago now, I think, and it was about Oumuamua and how
Yep.
that could possibly be an extraterrestrial type vehicle or some kind of technology. So he'll be speaking. He was always going to be a virtual speaker because he's teaching. So he'll still be a virtual speaker, but he was one I was really looking forward to. He's just a pleasant, nice man.
Yes. Yes, he is. Yeah.
So that's one. Lou Elizondo, he was going to be our keynote banquet speaker, and we're still going to work on like if we're going to have him just one of the regular slots or just keep him still on Wednesday night. So we'll kind of have our normal, we have a little cocktail hour on Wednesday, and we'll give out raffles, things like that. And then we'll have Lou speak. That's sort of the plan right now.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Lou's great. He was on, I don't know, a few months ago. And right now he's booked I booked him all the way into December.
Okay.
Because he's that, he's not.
I know. He's like going all the time.
He's so
I know
crazy busy. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can say, but he was at an undisclosed location with an undisclosed filmmaker. I know that down in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Yeah.
And
you can guess. Yeah.
And I think he was going to Spain right after our conference, but now that's iffy because of COVID.
Yeah, Portugal.
A lot of countries aren't letting us in anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But so.
And then who else do we have?
We have some of our regular and favorites: Kathleen Martin, Yvonne Smith. They both work with abductees and do hypnosis therapy. We have Lee Spiegel, who's been in the field forever, and he's also one of the radio hosts at KGRA. He's going to be speaking and showing clips from. He actually has the footage now of the UN meeting where
1978, I think, right?
Yeah. All these people were trying to get that bill passed. So he's actually got the rights to that, and he's going to play some of that video. So that should be really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Mark D'Antonio, another KGRA person. Some of the women that we have a couple of newer people to the field. Katie Grabowski, I'm sorry. And she's a MUFON investigator. She's going to be reporting on some of her investigations. And NK Kranda, she also does some investigations and also works with people who are abductees. So we have another person who works with abductees.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody I just kind of found through Ancient Aliens was Chris Pittman. I thought he was interesting, and I contacted him, and he actually hadn't been doing any UFO things for a long time because, I was kind of had to search for him, and I was like, I wonder why I haven't seen him. And he's agreed to do the conference, but he has been kind of stepped away because of some of the really weird experiences he's been having, or he had when he was really into the field. So he's going to talk about those. They were kind of a scary kind of thing. So luckily he's agreed to talk about that with us.
Now, what about Matthew Roberts?
Matthew Roberts.
He's excellent, by the way. Another excellent guest. Yes.
Another ex-military person who had some really strange things happen to him.
Yes.
And I think this is really good that people are, we have like him and also Eric Mitchell, who's another person who has these strange kind of almost Skinwalker Ranch type things happening connected to UFOs, but also very paranormal and unusual things that are happening. So I'm glad we have all three of these people that are going to be able to testify to the strange paranormal type things that can happen in conjunction with UFOs.
Right. Well, it'll be exciting, and you just have to go. And is it the whole International UFO? Is it just UFOcongress.com?
It's www.ufocongress.com. You can see the speakers, the schedule, buy tickets there. And we have a lot more speakers, and we're going to have some more coming because we were going to not have it on Sunday because that gives people time to pack up and enjoy the vendor hall and go home. But since we don't have that, we're going to open up all day Sunday too. So we'll have 5 more speaker slots. So be looking for some more speakers announced too.
Excellent. Well, Karen, thank you so much. It was good to see you.
You're welcome. It's good to see you too.
And we'll see you online and we'll see you online in just a few weeks, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I know. And
All
thank you
right.
so much. Okay.
Okay. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Yeah. Bye
Uh-huh.
bye. All right. My guest now is Don Heiden, and I'm going to be bringing him right in. But let me just say this. I mentioned this last week. I'm going to be over at Pine Bush, going to be there, and that's coming up on September 4th, Saturday. I'm getting in the day early. We're going to go to the museum. I think there's like an opening or a tour or something like that. So that's on Friday night on the 3rd. But if anyone wants to go to Pine Bush, or you're planning to, make sure you track me down. I always like listening. I mean, I always like meeting listeners is what I'm trying to say. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself and hope to see you there. Now, here's my guest, Don Heiden, and we're going to be talking about a very strange encounter he had about 30 years ago. And a lot of similarities. Well, I'll just let him talk about it. Here he is. Don, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me.
I thought it was kind of interesting. I actually thought it was a joke when someone said, hey, there's someone that has a Tic Tac UFO experience that's also an antique, like auction guy. And I said, no, that's got to be a joke. But anyway, I listened to your video and I was kind of blown away by a number of things you said, not just how you described what you saw, but other things too. So, but anyway, for the person who's, you're not in the UFO world, matter of fact, this is really outside of doing your own podcast or I'm sorry, live stream or recording, whatever you did about this. This is really the first time that you have ever spoken about this in this type of venue.
Yes, definitely so. Definitely so.
And I was glad that you only did it because I'm an antique guy.
That's honestly the truth. I looked in. If somebody contacts me, I got 1,500 videos up on YouTube. I got another 300 on Patreon, maybe almost 400. I don't do much with other people unless I'm researching them and stuff like that. And when somebody reaches out to me, that's the first thing I do. And again, the antique, I guess, drew it. You know, whether I'm on YouTube or not, I'm a pretty business oriented, and that's pretty much all I do. I don't have a ton of friends that I go hang out with, and we're usually into business, and that's most of my time.
Yep. No, I get that. I've always said this about the business of antiques and auctions, that it will take every single minute that you give to it. I mean, you can spend, I have a really close friend in the auction business. He's very successful, but he just goes, maybe 14 hours a day, every day. He doesn't stop.
That's me.
Yeah. And he's lifting furniture in his 60s. He's carrying, and he never stops.
I don't do furniture,
yeah, it's because it's kind of addictive. It's so much. I still love what I do. Yeah. And I promise the listener out there or the person watching on video that we're not going to talk about antiques. I'm just touching on it right now, but it's really nice when you have a career that you love, and I love what I do. I love exploring the history of things and the stories and the connections with people that these objects have, and we're all just babysitting objects for the time we're here and passing them on, and it's pretty fascinating to see what the lives are of these pieces that kind of go through our lives, and I'm not, I'm not a type of person that I get all excited about something value. I get more excited about something rare.
History.
The history of it. Yeah. And I was lucky enough, I never really talk about this, but I was lucky enough to handle Abraham Lincoln's second to last letter that he wrote on his knee in the White House lobby just like an hour before he left for the theater that night. So it was passed down in a family in New Hampshire. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. So it's a really fun business, and the connections and everything to the objects is quite amazing. But let's hear what happened to you while you were metal detecting.
Well, I've been a metal detector for, since probably 85 or so. We had run up and down. It was winters. I didn't metal detect in Florida in the summer. It was just way, way, way too hot. And we were heading back up towards the St. Mark's area. Anybody who metal detects, and I think I saw somebody who said they metal detect, I've always looked for hand hammer coins. That's what I always wanted. That was like the one thing that's scarce as can be. So we picked out a place near St. Mark's in Florida, which is a very old Spanish area, colonial, old trails and old stagecoach paths and walking paths up there. And we had metal detected at a place a couple other times. It's a 3-hour drive from where we were at. So I think we got up there around 3 and we were going to dig, and we were metal detecting up through an area out in a scrub brush area. We had parked, I wish I would have drawn a picture of it, but there we parked down a little tiny road that was half overgrown. It's just south, I would say southwest of St. Mark's by about 6 or 7 miles. There was a small fort site, and we had just been metal detecting. We had metal detected pretty much throughout the day. We stopped and ate. It was getting towards the dark, so we were making our way back to the car. There was a little trail through the woods. There's a bunch of woods. The woods break down into like a scrub brush. Anybody who's been in Florida probably knows what a scrub brush is, but it's like little tiny miniature palm trees. It almost looks like they're all over in some areas. You can't metal detect there, so you stick to where they cleared. And we were coming back down, me and a friend of mine, somebody I'd known. He lived next door to me. He's the one who actually introduced me to metal detecting in Florida. And I had got a signal. It was dark out. It had just turned dark maybe 10, 15 minutes ago. We tried to time it, so we hit back to the vehicle, just at dark. We didn't want to miss any time. Again, it's a 6-hour round trip, so we wanted to get as much metal detecting as we could. I had gotten leaned down. We were just almost out of the woods to where the field was again, and the field was, I don't know, 300-400 feet across this way and a lot wider this way, maybe 1,000 feet. I don't know. It was a decent sized field with like maybe a foot tall, like ryegrass or something on it. I don't know what it would be called, maybe weed or something. But we had just gotten towards the edge. I totally wasn't paying attention to what he was doing. I got a signal, and it was a good one. It was a solid beep, sounding like, a coin or maybe a button, which obviously is something you'd want to find. And I was digging it up, and he came up to me and tapped me on my shoulder, and I looked, and I really didn't pay much attention. And then he did it again, and I says, what? Come on. I was literally aggravated because, it's the last of the day. We didn't have anything really good that we had found, and I was hoping. And next time he tapped, it's pointing up, and all I said was, look. And I literally looked. I stood up and just dropped everything I had. And for the next maybe 2 or 3 minutes, again, I didn't have a watch. I wasn't paying attention at the time, but next 2 or 3 minutes, I just watched this orb bouncing around in the same little pattern, back and forth and back and forth. There was no sound. We were out in the middle of nowhere. There was no sound at all. And that's why we were puzzled, or I was puzzled, I should say. And as it bounced around, I can't say bounced. I don't know what you'd even call it. Skipped across like you're skipping a stone or something. I related it back then to I guess you'd call it a wind tunnel or a parachute tunnel or something like that we saw up in Canada back in the 80s or 90s. It was like locked in a spot. It was almost like it couldn't go past a spot on either side. Distance wise, I've been asked this before. I have to guess maybe a mile or less away from us. It was pretty much almost straight in front of us. To my left would have been where the Gulf was. To the right was the main highway heading up towards I-10. It's pretty far up north of St. Mark's. It's up by heading like you're heading up towards what else would be up that way? It's
the
to
Panhandle,
the west.
right? Is it the Panhandle?
It's right up towards the Panhandle, but it's not in the Panhandle. I think Lake City was maybe 50 miles to the east of us, maybe something like that. It's been a long time. I lived in Florida for 10 years, but at that point, we just stopped and we were staring at it for a couple of minutes because it was just, it was the weirdest thing I had ever seen. And I thought, well, at first, helicopter, what are you wasting my time? But within like 2 or 3 seconds of staring after, he finally got my attention with it, it wasn't moving right. There was no sound. You would have heard a helicopter at that distance. I can't imagine any way you couldn't have, and it was really quiet. I mean, you could still hear the crickets and all the birds and everything else was still out there. There was still rustling in the brush and the trees around me. And after watching it for a few minutes, it got bigger for just a second. Bigger. I don't know if it turned or it did come a little closer, but then within just a few more seconds, it was right up in front of us. I mean, it was like boom. And at that point, I was totally like weirded out because we didn't. Well, I keep saying we because I don't know exactly his expression on what he personally saw in that, but I couldn't see it move. I didn't see it move. It was just this ball bouncing around, and then all of a sudden it's right there in front of me. So I don't know if it moved or if it just was there. Again, that sounds weird, but that's my take on it. I don't know what it did. I didn't see it. If it moved so fast that I can't even comprehend the fact that it was that far away with this ball bouncing around versus this thing that's, right up here. And it was really surprising. And then you kind of notice what's going on after it's been here for a few seconds. There's no noise. I mean, it was almost like the wind even stopped. There was nothing. It was nothing at all. All I could do was hear, silence, dead silence in there as I looked.
No insects, right?
Nothing. There was no sound. And the only other time I can say I've ever heard something like that, if you're out in out in the country, we lived on a farm at one point in Hickory, Mississippi. The lightning strikes out there. You hear the crickets and everything's dead. And then slowly you hear the crickets come back up. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but yeah, the minute before the crickets started, you start coming back in. It was that dead silent. It was like an instant, like somebody flipped a switch is what it was like. Is 1 minute, everything's fine. And in the next minute, there's something right there. Then every single thing, it was nothing. That I think that was the part that really got me because it was, I don't want to say out of this world because I don't know what it was, but it defied my understanding of what should happen if something's flying above me. It wasn't, I mean, I've seen the shuttle, I've seen all kinds of stuff happen, and I've been on planes hundreds of times as a regional, and it defied logic to what it did.
Yeah.
And we watched it for 15, 20, maybe 25 seconds. I mean, the whole thing was 4 minutes or less, no exaggeration in time wise. And I was looking at it and it did a weird turn. It angled just a hair where it was kind of like cockeyed. And then a second later, it was gone. I mean, it was like I blinked and it was gone. It was just like, it was never there almost. It was the weirdest thing. Now, I don't know if after that, the bugs or anything, because I was totally, nothing else was on my mind. Let's go. We've had enough, let's get out of here. And that was pretty much all we said. We walked straight to the car, no more metal detecting, nothing. We had time. I was done. I don't know. It's a little hard to explain the feeling because I've never experienced anything weird. There was never anything like that. I wasn't, it's never anything that I thought I would ever even want to experience. I'm not looking for it. I wasn't a UFO guy in any way, shape, or form. We were metal detecting. I was gung-ho on finding, a hand hammered or something really good. And, it totally changed my whole thought for quite some time on it. That was the experience. That was the whole thing. That was it. Yeah.
But let's describe what you saw and why you decided to talk about it.
Well, with the 2017 coming out, the object was literally to the T, the same description. Now, let me step back for a second here. There are some appendages on the bottom, and I've had questions about that, what I saw. When I first saw it in front of us, right up on top of us, I can't say there was anything under it. I can't say at all. I don't know because I was just so fixated on a solid object that close that it was 50 feet in front of us and about 125, maybe 150 feet above the ground. And I can say that fairly accurately because there was trees. There was 3 trees, one real big tree, and then 2 other little trees out in the center of the field. There was taller grass around there like they never plowed it. At one point, there was a deer stand out there. It may have even been out there that day. I don't know. There's a deer hunter. There was even tracks where we were walking. Looked like somebody had at some point been going through there with 4-wheelers left and right at some time. I don't know what hunting season is, so maybe it was still hunting season. I have no clue on that. Not a hunter, never been hunting in my life. Nothing wrong with it. My father-in-law has hunted his whole life, so I've eaten venison from them and all. But the fact that something was just sitting there in the sky, I was locked. There was nothing else going on in my world other than what we were looking at. Nothing. No, I don't think even if he was yelling, I would have probably heard it at that point, because I was so fixated on the experience of this thing just sitting there, and I don't know anything that can freeze in midair like that. It wasn't wavering from where it was at. It was just in one single spot. No movement back and forth, left and right, or nothing. And I can say that without a doubt because that tree was there. It was like, there's no way I can explain it with anything natural that I've ever seen in my life. There's no way to say that something could do that and freeze in mid-air. That it was just there. I mean, I don't know how to voice it enough, because there's no explanation to say what would do that in my mind. And again, I've seen the shuttle take off from the 3-mile mark. We've seen them explode a rocket that was off course. I've seen the Blue Angels. We've been to the air shows, back in Meridian. They used to have a real nice air show in Meridian, Mississippi. And, I have nobody has ever shown me anything that could explain it. Nothing other than, and I'm bad on names. Fravor,
David Fravor.
David Fravor. I'm sorry. David Fravor. The only thing that matched or even came that rocked me out of my world was the explanation. And now when I first heard the explanation of the TicTac, I never related it to TicTac. I never even, I think, saw a TicTac. I know that might sound weird, but I'm not a big candy person. And then he talked about the propane tank. And again, I never thought about a propane tank at that point. I don't think I've ever seen a propane tank, those big ones. Those are like country things. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I'm used to the small ones, but that fit so much, I mean, to the T on everything I saw. Again, that pretty much changed my opinion on talking about it. A year and a half ago, I actually mentioned it on a live stream, on one of my live streams, and ever since then, it may have been a little farther back than that. I don't know. It's been a long time, and I promised my subscribers I would talk about it. And I didn't really want to put it all out there because I know all the ridicule and stuff a lot of people get from that. And I've heard stories and stuff, and my history on it. We've been attacked on YouTube, so I'm always cautious on stuff like that. After they bugged me, not bug, I to apologize if anybody's watching who was part of the reason I put that out there, but I did the video a year and a half after I did, and I pretty much just did it on the spur of the moment just to get it out there. Again, I'm not a UFO person at all. I'm not one to put stuff out like that. I'm very much tied to business. If anybody sees my videos on what I actually do for a living, I'm very much out there. And I didn't want to. The video I put up about this, I put up on my small channel. I only had 5,000. I've got 10 times that on my normal channel. I was just doing it for subscribers, I guess, because I gave my word I would put it out there. And I guess that's why I feel a little more comfortable these days with the government report coming out. Extremely disappointed we didn't get to see the real stuff, which I'm sure they have. But
we'll see how that goes. That's supposed to be the preliminary report, and nobody talks about that. They act like that's the only report we'll ever see. That's possible, but it was called the preliminary report. Now you made a model, and I want to show the model because people are going to kind of flip out when they see it. Look at that. Look at that model with the appendages, and they were just very much like David Fravor described. Dave Beatty did a 3-dimensional.
Now on these, as I said, I thought they were landing feet. That's what I thought because of the way it just sat there. I can't say they were there originally, so I don't know if these are always there. As strange as that sounds, there's no holes, there's no seams, nothing. There's nothing. I mean, a propane tank, I had to look at one actually to see. I wouldn't say a propane tank, but it's everything else I've ever seen has a seam, has a rivet. Unless even if you 3D print something, I guess you'd still have some point where it's not going to be perfectly smooth. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I'm not a big person on all that kind of stuff, but to me, unless it was made in one solid piece, which I don't know how you'd ever get anything inside of it, there was nothing. It was just a closed structure, solid. Again, somebody.
And what about? Excuse me. What about lights?
The best explanation I can say, and I've thought about it for a long time, is that the object itself appeared like it was in broad daylight, even though it was night out. It was almost like enough glow was reflecting off of it to make it lit up around it. I should say. I don't know
Did it
how.
almost have like a glow around it?
It had not a halo, but like kind of surrounded with light, like a bubble of light. Not a bubble per se, but there was no lights on it, but it was like as bright as the moon, I guess you could say at the time. The moon wasn't out like a full moon or anything. So, but it was bright. It was illuminated somehow. That's what I could say. But it reminded me of what you might see in the daylight, but it was daylight and the rest of it wasn't. As strange as that sounds, I don't know how else to explain it, because there was no source of light, but it was lit. You know.
So, Brett wants to know, when did you construct your model?
Probably 7 years ago, and I can say that for a relative. And again, I can't prove any of that, but I can say that fairly well because it's been in a box since we moved here. And again, I've got hundreds of models that I do, so it was thrown in a box with a whole bunch of other stuff.
So what inspired you to all of a sudden make that model? Were you just thinking about it one day?
One day I decided to do a trilobite. So I did a trilobite. I mean, this is resin cast. I carved it out of, Chavant clay, which is what they used to do like maquettes and stuff at Disney. I've messed with that stuff. I worked at Disney for a while. So that's what I did with that. I make models all the time. I probably made 3 or 4 that very same day I did that one too. And it sat in a box with everything else. I've got probably 100 boxes that haven't been unpacked in 7 years, probably. Merchandise, stuff that I don't know what to do with, or, family stuff that we keep. We're a business, and all of my efforts go usually into that. So I didn't pull it out. People were asking, why didn't you show up the first video? The first video, I turned on the camera and I started talking. I don't plan everything that I do. Again, if I wanted to plan it, I would have done a huge thing, and I would have put it on my channel with almost 60,000 views instead of putting it on my 5,000 view channel. I did it to satisfy a statement I made that I would put it out there for my subscribers. I never thought it would get to anything big. It was just to put it out there. I mean, that was it.
Like 38,000 people found it.
Yeah, but again, that channel, I mean, I don't have many views on that channel at all. It wasn't like planned. I figured it would just go to the people that been asking me for a year and a half about the experience. And I almost thought I shouldn't have said anything, but I spilled the beans on a live show once. And, I'm not open on certain personal aspects of my life online. I'm mostly business, and I keep it that way usually. And, you get to the questions like, what's the weirdest thing you ever had happen? And that's usually what comes up. It's been a bar story I've told people. We used to go to a place called Sportstown Billiards on Orange. I think it's on Orange in Orlando area. And I don't know how many times we'd play pool and that story came up,
Yeah. A lot of people say that. And I've had people ask me the same question, for years. And I'll either tell them that, or I had this weird, I don't want to call it a ghost, but something happened in a place. And I'll tell those stories, but I know exactly what you mean. So there is a question from Richard C. So you didn't see the appendages at first, but you saw them after? It turned. So it was above you and you couldn't see them. And as soon as it turned.
Well, they might have been there. I can't say, but they were the exact same color as far as I could see as the item itself. So I don't, I didn't see it till it turned because it cast. I could see through these little things. The only reason I think I even saw it, they may not even have been there before. I don't know. That's the only reason I thought that they might have been feet and it was going to land or something.
Oh, they might have popped out or something. Yeah.
Pardon me?
They may have popped out or something. You thought?
I don't know. I didn't see it happen. If it did, I was totally fixated on this 25+ foot thing sitting up above us with nothing, just sitting there. It was like it was locked into position. It defied my logic, and I'm a fairly logic person. I mean, I've spent 6 years in college earning a master's in research and communication. I got to have facts for everything. I got to see it, and to me, it defied anything that was logical in my thoughts. It totally I was stumpified. I didn't know what to say. I was just totally like lost for a minute there, other than let's get out of here at this point, because I felt uncomfortable. You know, I wasn't like scared, I should say, but I felt really uncomfortable because it felt like I was being watched. It felt like somebody was eyeballing me from behind, even though I've been looking at it. That's what it felt like. Like, you know, what else is out here, you know, because we're out in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't like I was, you know, out in the middle of a city street or something. We're out in the middle of nowhere. We've run into alligators out in the woods and stuff. So, you know, you never know what to expect, but that was beyond it. I'd rather run into alligators. You know, at least I feel a little more comfortable. I know how fast they can run and walk slow and don't call to attention to, you know, that kind of thing. But,
and you have I don't know if you still have it, but I know you told me you had a really good metal detector. I don't know what the brand was.
I've got a Tesoro Golden Saber 2.
Yeah. And so, but you just like dropped it and the headphones popped off your ears. And
if you metal detect, headphones are like $40 or $50 for a decent one. And the cords, you always damage the cords. So I'm always very careful. I usually wrapped it around the handle. There's a bend in the handle, and I usually wrapped it around the bend where the grip is. And I let it go. It pulled the cord out and everything. And that was, you know, I didn't even care. I totally forgot what we were doing. All I cared about was what's going on as I'm looking up at this thing. And I didn't even look at my friend. I'm sure he was doing the exact same thing. My eyes were locked. There was nothing else in my world other than what was bouncing around and moved up in front of me. That was just the only thing going on at that time. I you know what I mean? It was, I don't want to say earth shattering, but it really changed my view on what would be possible, I guess.
Yeah, I would say earth shattering if I was going to describe it. But here's a question. I'm only putting this up because several people are asking, and this seems to happen when people have encounters like this. Did you happen to notice any missing time? Like you thought, well, I thought it was 3 o'clock, but it's actually 5 or anything like that?
No, I would say that wouldn't be possible at all. Probably was dark at 8:30, 9 o'clock. We'd probably been up there 5 or 6 hours. We were home probably around midnight, so I can't imagine where time would have went otherwise. I mean, I've been asked that too, and I've never. No, I could say no unless I don't know it, but I can't imagine that being the case. I mean, I never wore watches back, and then it was you couldn't read them. I didn't have any way to read it back, you know. So why wear them, you know? And plus, you get them dirty. My wife gave me a nice. I can't remember the brand anymore. It's been since trashed, but she gave me a watch, and I would never wear that out to dig up. You know, you usually got gloves on and the whole works. You might get glass in your hand if you don't, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I just want to give a shout out to Basement Podcast with Bob and Chad. I was on there last week, and anyone can find that like I think it's on any podcast app out there. Real fun guys. Anyway, I really had a good time with them. So if you want to check out that show, look up the Basement Hangout podcast. That was last week. But so when this happened, you mentioned that your friend that you were with, you weren't really talking about it as it was happening. What about the ride home?
We listened to the radio. I think about the only words we said was that was pretty weird, and that was about it.
You know, that is so common. I have to tell you, that's one of the, it seems like a commonality, I guess I would call it that, when people have sightings together. I could tell you so many stories that it's exactly the same thing that happened. I mean, the Allagash incident up in Maine. There's so many. Even a friend of mine who's an antique dealer auctioneer that had a sighting with his friends that was right over their head as they were walking along when he was a teenager. They never talk about it. What about when I know you mentioned that you haven't really been in touch too much with your friend over the years, but was he out there talking about the story? I know you talked about it with your friends and family all these years.
My wife worked with his wife, and I worked in the same complex at Disney back in those days. So, I mean, the wife talked about it. What was he doing back? I don't remember what he was even doing as a living back then. I think he was an antiques dealer. He was heavy into military, and one of his friends was even he did like Daguerre, modern day Daguerre types and Ambro types and things like that. I know he told people too, for fact, without a doubt, because I heard it back from somebody else who had talked to him and wanted to hear my side of the story if he was telling the truth. And, I literally told him the story from start to finish, which was apparently the same thing as his too. I mean, again, we talked about it maybe 3 times after that. On the way in the car, I was totally lost in deep thought on trying to rationalize what I saw, I guess you would say, because I don't know what you'd say about it. I didn't, and somebody said, well, why didn't you report it? I don't know who you'd report that to. I would be nervous to tell a police officer, hey, we saw this thing out there in the middle of the woods that, made no sound and the animals stopped. I mean, I don't know.
That's my experience was I called the police department when I was in Carmel Valley. And I actually called the Monterey Police Department because that object was heading that way. And I had a sarcastic woman on the other end of the line that put me on hold forever. So I didn't know who to call either. This was 2007. I had no idea that there was even anything online that you could report to that actually is there. One of the things you mentioned is about, which I think would freak me out the most, is about the silence of the insects, animals, and all that happening at once. We had someone on this show maybe 2 years ago that talked about a military sighting he had somewhere in Florida, where he said he was right near the Everglades, and it was extremely loud. Your ears almost rang with all the insect noise.
Yeah, the bug. Yeah, yeah, I've been down that way. I know. And
all of a sudden, everything went dead quiet when the object came over him, and the dogs were trying to hide. They had German shepherds all in their pens, and they were all trying to hide. And but there's many stories of the exact same thing, like completely dead silence. For instance, I don't know if you saw the Berkshire's UFO encounter on Unsolved Mysteries last year. But
I don't watch any TV or anything else like that.
Oh yeah, you work. I know.
Yeah, I don't. I have
Yeah.
Vision issues, so my time's limited to what I can actually see and stuff.
Yeah. So, but anyway, in that particular episode, they talk about it seemed like they were underwater. That's what happened to the sound. The sound just seemed like you were underwater all of a sudden, with all the insects and everything. So that's not an uncommon thing at all. The other thing I already mentioned was, not to talk about it with the person you had the experience with. A really good thing to have done that a lot of people never think of, but I just say this to anyone out there that might be listening who may have a sighting, is immediately separate from the person you had the encounter with and draw what you saw. That's I learned that from a UFO researcher in Switzerland. Class fun, but you just have no way to pollute what you saw when you just separate yourselves and
this was so close and so just a basic shape. You know what I mean? It would be hard pressed to come up with any other description of it other than a big white oblong tube, basically, because that's all it was. There was no defining marks, other than the things on the bottom. Again, I really thought they were feet for a minute there, and I don't know what I would have done if it landed there. Was, I think, the other step. And part of the reason I just wanted to go. I was done. Once it was gone, and I wasn't like locked staring at it, where I couldn't get anything else out of my, that was the only thing in my head. It was the only thing going on was, what's this doing? I mean, that's all I could think of. And, let's get out of here was the only thing I could think of after it was gone. Because
pardon me. Go ahead.
No, you were going to say, did I feel threatened?
Yeah.
No, I would say no. I felt like somebody was looking over my shoulder, was like like I'm being watched, like someone was eyeballing me, I guess. There was some movie, Are You Eyeballing Me, Boy? And that's what it felt like, I guess, more than anything else. It was like I don't know. I can't explain it. It was a weird experience. I've never felt or felt that weird or odd about anything else before or after. I don't have any way to. I wasn't scared so much or anything else like that. I was maybe intimidated. I don't know what would be the correct term for that. I'm very apprehensive. I wasn't didn't want to be there anymore. I'll put it that way. I wasn't necessarily, I didn't want to see what happened next if it landed or you know, we were in the wrong place at the wrong time or anything else. I already blew off any option that it was some government vehicle in my mind, because there's no way. My father was in the military. You know, I've seen helicopters and I've been in that kind of stuff, and I've been on bases and stuff. My father was at Fort Knox. We went to Fort Knox as a kid. So I was, it was incomprehensible what happened I have no way to rationalize or to explain it other than that. There's no other explanation. The propulsion thing was the most puzzling in my mind. Again, I had a full-time job. We were working 60 hours at Disney. If I did get out, we went metal detecting. So it occupied my brain for weeks. And then after that, it was back to, you know, hanging out with my wife. We just got married, I think, just before that. Well, actually, we got married after that. That definitely was before I was married, now that I think about it. So, I mean, we'd been dating for a year, I think, at that point, maybe.
Did you talk about it with your colleagues?
Oh, yeah. The first thing I said when we got out, because the wife, his wife had said something to it too. And my wife told people also about it. It was all Disney people at Disney and stuff. And I still talk to quite a few people from Disney as well.
Yeah. So Richard wanted to know, have you or your family had other unexplained experiences? Nothing. Yeah.
Never. The one and only thing I can ever say is this.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that some people, I don't know if you could turn your volume down just a little bit, but I think we may be having a little bit of feedback. So to your speakers, one of the,
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's all right. So one of the theories that people come up with, because I believe I told you that when we were talking off air, like I know less about this topic than when I started 367 shows ago, whatever it is, or is it, I don't even know how many shows I've done, but a lot. Anyway, the point is, some people have the theory that this is possibly interdimensional. When you talk about the behavior of the object, that could almost fit. And by the way, it was 467 shows. That's what I meant to say. What do you think about that? I mean, did it feel like it could be popping in and out of?
Pardon me?
Did it feel like it could be popping in and out of your reality, basically?
I see, the problem with that thinking in my mind was that I had to assume by the fact that when it was at a distance, it did get a little bigger for just a second, and then it was there. I assume that it moved that quickly these days. That's what I think now. Then maybe a different story. But now with science, I took physics and astronomy in college. I've dug into that, not because of this. It had nothing. It was part of my pre-required classes for it. But I almost wonder if they've been here, they've under the water. If again, this is just speculation. Who knows at this point? Maybe they are from somewhere else. My biggest, I want to bring up a scientist for just, you mind if I go off on tangent about why I think certain things for just a second?
Sure. Yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. I've watched him in the past. I've watched the universe, all that kind of stuff. And I admired him until these scientists blow off the fact, well, it's too far away. There's no way they can get here in this time. That kills it for me on anybody these days, because we're in our infant stage of understanding science. In my opinion, we're talking about somebody who could have been something else, who could have been around for a million years. It only took, I collect antiques, as you know, and we talk about antiques. If I go back 100 years, the stuff we have now would be completely unrecognizable in any way. If I took a cell phone back to the Revolutionary War, they would be in awe. It would pretty much stop society to see what this thing is. And I personally feel that they could get here, and I think we just don't understand technology enough to transverse the amount of distance that you would have to. I personally feel that science is just in its infancy. You were mentioning Ari Loeb. I do like him, and he's the first scientist, and I heard what happened to him after he came out, and he's the first one. I think he is an astrophysicist, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
He's the first one that I feel that he's being sincere and he's more interested in the science versus sticking. I got a master's degree. There's a clique in college that the professors there promote fellow professors' books. They all stick in a little clique. And again, no offense to anybody else. I would like to have my PhD one day too, but I feel that this type of thing is holding it back. I truly believe that the space distance means nothing with the right technology, and I believe that technology is here. If the Russians had this, if China had this in 89, 90, we wouldn't be having an arms race. They wouldn't need to invest the money they are into military. It would be done. We wouldn't be able to do anything about it. It would be done. It defies logic if somebody has this here. Again, maybe they're in the water. Maybe the story of Atlantis is some, glimpse of something. A lot of it seems to happen by water. My experience was a very, very close distance to the Gulf. I don't know. I just think that the idea that they're from 20 light years away is completely 100% a possibility, just because with, again, the right technology, it doesn't mean you have to have wormholes or anything else like that. I just feel we don't understand how it all works yet. And we know that.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here. And I've had people on that, were basically debunkers type or skeptics that I've talked about this. And so I posed the question, maybe they understand some physics that we have not discovered yet, because we will discover physics in the future. And the problem with science, and a lot of scientists, not all of them, but we're always thinking that we know everything there is to know, which is absolutely ridiculous, because you can't go forward if you have a mind like that. I mean, you're closed-minded to discovering things because you just think it can't be done. You can't traverse the stars because it can't be done. It's too far.
We can't do it. That doesn't mean somebody 100 years, 1,000 years more advanced than us can't do it. They're comparing apples and oranges. It would be like asking a caveman to do it versus asking us to go to the moon. I am stymied by just the thought that they say the distance is too great. It's too great for us. It's too great for us. We couldn't even travel across the ocean for most of human existence. We had no means to do it, whether we could navigate it or not, or guide our direction by the stars or not. We had no way to do it. And that wasn't that long ago. So the idea that just because we can't transverse space, it may mean nothing. The fact that it could, and again, I'm assuming at this point that it moved from above the trees almost a mile away to right in front of us in the blink of an eye or quicker, because it moved that fast. I personally feel that it was able to put in a direction or a spot it went, and it instantly transversed that distance in that grade, or that split second. That's what I truly, honestly believe, and I believe science is stymieing it because they're already assuming that can't happen, and that's the problem with holding this back. That's why Ari Loeb, I've watched his whole talk on that. Actually, I need to get his book. But and I'm not big on reading, not that I don't read, but I don't have time for it. But I would put the time down to see what that professor has to say, because that is what we need more of. Because again, saying we can't do it means no one can do it is crazy. It's totally crazy. That would mean we couldn't split the atom and all these other things that we have been able to do. And that's nothing. For all we know, other societies or whoever could be coming here never even needed to split the atom. Maybe there was some element on their planet that made it totally pointless to do that. Just like a Dyson sphere they talk about. I think no one needs that. I think that's a crazy thing to be looking for, basically, because it would be more work than it was worth if you could harness it in a smaller area. Why would you need to do that's these theoretical physicists drive me nuts, because I could theorize anything. It doesn't mean it's real, but then they say you can't go the distance, but yet they're theorizing stuff that they have no explanation. And it's the same thing as traveling the distance.
Right. Well, we're right up to our break here. We're going into a 3-minute break, and over at KGRA Radio, you'll be having messages over there. So hang in, and we'll be right back. And for those of you watching live, we have a little clip here regarding the Nimitz case. And here we go. But Kevin, there was, how many would you say that you saw in any given situation at one time?
They appeared on the radar in groups of 5 to 10 at a time. And if I was to add up all the groups over the entire period of time we were tracking these things, there was probably about 100 total objects. Now, I don't have any idea if they were 100 separate objects or they were the same 5, groups, the same groups basically repeating somehow. I don't even know if they're all the same shape and size, because all I'm looking at on my console is a symbol. Symbology represents everything. So it's based on my loose math of about 100 altogether.
So, going back to, Gary's thoughts or whatever, it just seems like if there was this Tic Tac shaped objects that was developed by the military and they were testing them, you would seem to kind of get the idea that a lot of people would be seeing them. It wouldn't just be your situation. They'd be seeing them over and over and over. And are there any other, people that have come forward saying they're seeing the same objects that you're aware of?
I know Kevin has done some research in this, especially with the sightings around the same area that we were at. And apparently there's been hundreds of people that have seen it.
So
yeah, and then the more recent events on the East Coast with the Roosevelt battle group, according to some of the reports I've heard from those guys, is they were seeing some sort of objects out there almost on a daily basis for a period of time.
But that's more
that's where
go ahead.
That's where the gimbal and the go fast videos came from.
Yeah, I was going to say, but that's the gimbal is not, you're not your Tic Tac shape, and then you're going to be getting into some other type of technology that is. If it's our own, But
they could have different models using the same thing. They could be for different things, because RF-18s don't look like jumbo jets. It's just a matter of where they could have different purposes. One could be reconnaissance. One could be, for use for actual combat.
2, 1, go.
All right. Welcome back. This is Martin Willis, and tonight we have Don Heiden on, and he is talking about a UFO encounter. And I just ran that clip because, we were talking there. I was talking about technology back in 2004, and we have someone that observed something very similar much earlier. Welcome back, Don.
Good to be back.
Don, did you say that was more like 1989, 1990? Something like that.
It was in the winter, 89, 90. It would have been like December or January, one of those two. I can't give you a specific date. We've metal detected up there, God, I don't know how many times, throughout that area.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever asked you this, but has anyone ever given you a hard time about this story? Like if you're out in a bar or whatever and you're talking
No,
about
honestly, no. I got a bunch from the first video I put up, I think I had ended up deleting like 12 nasty comments. But I get them on my videos about eBay and stuff all the time. So,
yeah, it kind of goes with the territory, unfortunately, whenever you're out there talking about, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, really. I've
never had anybody in person ever, they wanted to hear the whole thing and ask questions and stuff. Usually, that's usually the end of the extent of the thing. And then we went on to doing whatever we were doing after the conversation usually.
Yeah. And so, you were making a really good point about Neil deGrasse Tyson, about other scientists, and in particular, I just did want to mention that if you go to the debrief website, Leslie Kane wrote an article. I think it came out last week sometime. And in that article, she does talk about people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and how he's like closed-minded. And an interview, I have a clip here on my YouTube channel about him, basically being.
Don't get me wrong. I think he's doing a good service. I think he's good in it, but he's stymieing because he just assumes it's not possible to begin with. And I want to be more open to not. I think that's what a scientist should be.
Yeah. I like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
So do I. Don't get me wrong, but I lost
his series, and I think he's a great speaker, but he does say things that don't make sense. Like he doesn't, and then he goes on to say that no one should really talk about something unless they really know about it. But he does that with the
I'm
UFO.
not trying to pick on him either. He's just, I figured everybody knew who he was. There's a bunch of the other ones, Green and some of the other ones and stuff. So
yeah, right, Brian Green. Yeah, but it is interesting. But what has happened, I think, and it just seems like a snowball effect. I don't know how much you really have time to pay attention to any of this, but it is sort of snowballing. Science is starting to snowball their interest in this topic. And the more, like NASA is going to look into the UAPs, that's pretty important. And I think, I don't know what's going to happen. I heard you mention earlier, even off air, you just want to know in your lifetime what it is. I'm not sure if we're going to know, but it seems like we have been moving the needle over the last few years. And
with the report that they put out, I know it's preliminary, as we were talking before. My only problem is it's only covers like the last 2 years of incidences. That's part of the problem, that they barely skim the surface of what they have to have. I mean, there's just like I read an article, I don't remember the where it was at, I saved it somewhere, but saying we have material from sites that people have found. And like, not to go off tangent for a minute, but like Bob Lazar, I'm a very suspicious person on anything. I got to see the facts, but even what he says matches it. And I didn't figure that out until after, 2017. I was never into that. I don't watch any of those mystery shows or ancient aliens. I don't have time for any of that. And even if I did, that's not what I would watch. Again, I think that some of these scientists are nervous. They don't want their world to change, and I think they're stuck in there. And I saw somebody put a comment. He put his foot down. Again, I'm no disrespect to Professor Tyson or anything else like that. I just think that they had, again, I seen the professors in person. I dealt with them for my board to pass my master's. I know how klitschy and groupy they all are, and again, no disrespect, but that is how the whole thing works. Every professor in master, for when I was going for my master's, all the books that we had to do or address or things were stuff that was related to friends of theirs they went to school with or professors they went to, and that's the only reason they picked them. And that even what I had a professor for, we took Japanese history, and even he said he was tenured. He's still here. He's still at University of Toledo, and he had made some comments on how it is, and that perfectly fits how I thought and what I saw. And I just don't want things stymied. I think the idea, again, as I said earlier, that if you're saying it can't be possible, you're never going to look into it. You're never going to find out if it is or isn't if you think it's not from the start. You're already made up your mind what's going to happen at the end of the study. Yeah.
There's a saying that goes along those lines, an old saying. I probably shouldn't say this, but I do have an issue with Bob Lazar.
I'm not saying I don't either, but some of the I'm not wholeheartedly believing everything he says, but some of his there's a little too more information than him just being some kook. There's
he's extremely bright. There's
Can I give you a Bob Lazar story? I've actually talked to him.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's hear it. Yeah.
In my son's going for a chemistry engineering degree, and Bob Lazar owns, I don't know if he still does, United Nuclear, and they used to be in Michigan. And my son had a vintage Geiger counter that we got at in Hocking Hills area in Ohio. He got a vintage detector, and so I got him a piece of depleted uranium, and I still have it. I can prove it. I've got the piece from United Nuclear still here. I called, and he answered the phone. I didn't know who he was. I had no idea who Bob Lazar was in any way, shape, or form when I talked to him. I talked to him for 15 or 20 minutes. He spent his time, he offered to, because I was worried about getting my son depleted uranium. So, I was definitely afraid my son was trying to get something that might be illegal, that might call attention, that people might think we're up to something crazy. So I had a long conversation about it. He told me he could eat it and it wouldn't hurt him. And he went on to a whole story. He actually sealed it himself in a little glass vial for us. I mean, we're talking like a $60 purchase, and he spent 15 minutes of his time with me, and he was as bright a person as I think I've ever talked to in the science aspect of it, without a doubt. And this is true story. I literally talked to him for that time about it when they were in maybe Grand Rapids, because we were even worried about how they could ship it. And we realized they were local, and I offered to come and pick it up if there was an issue with it as well. And that was fine. And we had a 15-minute conversation or so with Bob Lazar over United Nuclear. And again, I didn't know who he was at all. And I didn't even know he owned United Nuclear until like 2018 when somebody else brought it up. I had no clue it was the same gentleman who talks about that. If he isn't who he says he is, I would be shocked, at least with his background. I've seen the jet car, printout. I've seen his name in one of the telephone directories, and on and on. So yeah, there could be something, not totally straight about everything. But again, I'm like the element, whatever the element, 114 or
115, I think,
115,
or maybe 151 element. Someone in chat will let me know.
Yeah, I think it's 115 or something like that.
Yeah.
But the whole idea that he would have just been making something up that actually now they can prove is there. So again, it comes back to, we don't understand so much that, some other place could have something that can do stuff that we can't.
Yeah. I'm not gonna get into the Bob Lazar argument, because every time I do, I get a lot of email. But I do have some interesting documents, but that's all I'm gonna say right now. And there's also the body language panel observed a lot of his videos, and there was a lot of inconsistencies, but I'm trying not to go there, so let's move on. So what do you think about when you hear, I mean, over the years you must have seen, no one talked about the topic at all, really. It just seemed that way. I started this show in 2011, and I thought it was fascinating, but you really didn't hear it at all in mainstream media. And then all of a sudden, after 2017, you're hearing it. And have you done, or you actually told me off air that you've really looked into, it was baffling to you because of the similarity. So you started saying, what's going on here?
No, I don't watch people. I wouldn't watch this if it wasn't me on, I wouldn't be watching it, and I'm not going to watch myself, of course, but I have to see video. The videos I watch, if there's video posted of it, I come to my conclusion whether I think it's BS. The pilot ones, in my mind, are, again, I can't imagine, them not being something out of the ordinary. If our government can't detect where they came from and all, what was the last one with the pyramid shaped ones that was all over the place?
Yeah, that's still not quite, they still don't know quite about what that one was in particular. There was one off of the Missouri. Well,
that was I'm talking about the one that they swarmed it. I looked into that one, very specific one. I tracked down, online, you can see the logbooks from the ships, the actual logbooks that they wrote the events on. And then I looked into the technology that was on the ship on a ton of other military sites, because I thought about doing a video, but I didn't want to get bombarded. And I just said, I'm not going to do any more like that. But I looked into all that. The ships involved have the most technology we have in this entire country. The top of the line, everything. If you look up what that ship looked like, it looks like some futuristic hull.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's not even
very strange looking. Yes,
there's only 7 of those in the whole entire arsenal, and those ships have the most advanced technology we have underwater, in the air, and the ground. And for them not to know where it came from, where it went, for people to say it's a balloon or it's this or that, we can tell anything that's terrestrial bound pretty much from what I've seen, and to have matching radar from the ship, from other ships, to have logbooks that all match. And it's not technology that I could say that we would be putting out there. It doesn't make any sense. It defies logic to be spending all the money on these other things. Again, even like the space program, the space program would be useless if we could do that. We could just zip. We're wherever we want to be. That's, again, I just can't see why it would be hidden. And again, in 89, 90, the technology, there was no cell phones. The technology was,
barely.
analog based. Well, yeah, barely. There was the brick ones too, but
That's what I had.
yeah. The point is though, it wasn't. We were still, caveman considering the electronics and technology with what we have today. And what I saw has to be well above and beyond that. It's not 20, 30 years like, the military works. It's got to be way farther than that. And if it is military, where did they get the way to do that? It's not, Harvard, they work with major universities. Who's doing it if they are? And then I've had people say, well, it's probably some individual. Where would an individual get the technology, the power, and all the other things tied to it to be able to do that, and then to be able to hide it? It's so advanced. There'd have to be a bunch of people doing this, and
why wouldn't it be used in any conflict?
It would change the world.
Yeah. Right.
That's why I can't see it, because why we wouldn't have had to done anything. We could just outmaneuver every plane they have. We could just do this. We could just do that. When I was digging into this, one of the reports, and this was from, I think, the head of Strategic Command or some real high-ranking person. He said a story, and I want to almost say maybe it was head of the Department of Defense quite a while ago. He said there was a story of a pilot's plane, one of ours, being frozen in midair when one of these things was up there. So, this is from some high-ranking person. This is, again, in our government. I've seen one of the Canadian officials saying something similar. And what's the gentleman in Pope, I think his last name is, from the UK?
Nick Pope. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, there's enough out there to say that they know more than they're telling us, I guess, is the point.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said on the show, for the listener, probably heard me say it way too many times, but I think it's possible our government may know a little more than we do, but I'm still not convinced that they know what it is. I would
agree with that.
Yeah,
I think they know a lot more about what it looks like and some trajectories and stuff like that, but I don't think they can go beyond that because we can't catch them. Whatever they are, if they're being honest with it, then I have to take them at their word with the videos. Like the video where the ship splits up, and I think that's in maybe Puerto Rico. It turns into two ships. It goes in the water and turns into two. Again, that's unexplainable. I know they talk about quantum physics and this and that.
And it goes in and out of the water medium without any slowdown or splash, which is another really bizarre thing. And there's no sonic boom with high speed. You didn't hear a sonic boom, did you?
No, nothing at all.
Yeah.
And that's again why I come back to why I say it's not ours, and it's not Russians, it's not Chinese. Look at their budgets. Look at our military budget. We wouldn't need anything if we already had this. We could, who knows, unless it costs a fortune to make just one of these, but there's obviously more than one, and they've been around for a long time. I dug into this because I didn't want to think I was crazy. And I dug into this after 2017. There's a bunch of other TicTac experiences. It's not just 1, 2 offs or 3. And all this stuff goes back to the Foo Fighters back in World War II and stuff. And I've seen reports going back even farther than that, modern day ones by people of more high rank, people of understanding, educated people who should know to be able to distinguish some crazy thing versus reality. And I have to say that there's not a preponderance of evidence because there's not enough here. Just like, again, I'm not trying to pick on Neil deGrasse Tyson. I do admire him, so don't get me wrong, but saying, why don't they just land on the White House? Well, no one's we don't speak for the whole world. They look at, if they're watching our signals, we fight over just awful, stupid things. And why would they risk it? And then you come into religious ramifications and all these other things like the Hail Bop thing and all that kind of stuff with so again, if you're looking at this from the outside, I don't know if me as a person would even be wanting to talk to another country if I hadn't seen them before. It'd be awkward. Just like I hear people talking about, well, why would they have lights? Well, we have lights on our vehicles. Just because they're here doesn't mean they don't drive those around in their own place and have to identify where they're at. Lights are a common thing for a reason on objects, so you don't hit something. I mean, why is it?
But there's that is a subject that's come up in this show a number of times. Why do they have lights? And there's speculation, maybe because they want to be seen.
Well, even not for that, just the ships probably have lights. They don't take them off to come here. And whether they want to be seen or not, they don't want to be totally seen because they won't stick around at the end of the day is what it is. but again, if they were our military, too many people have seen it. It would defeat the purpose. It's not like the Black Hawk or something, or some top secret stealth plane or something. It's already out there. That was only behind the scenes for 15 or 20 years. At this point, if we had this technology from 89, 90, it would have been out by now, you would think.
That's right. Yeah. And you mentioned about the report and how basically that they only want to go back so many years. And their excuse for that is that they have modern equipment to get the data from. But I totally agree with you that they are missing out on so much because of, there's radar reports from way back of objects doing right-hand turns at, I don't know, 5,000 miles an hour and stuff like that. Pretty crazy things that have been
600
happening
Gs.
forever. What's that?
600 Gs and higher, I heard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, for instance, that was observed from the Nimitz and the Princeton and all that from that case. And
like with after the report, it's just been silent too. And then that kind of bothers me too, because they haven't, even the news picked up on it for a minute and then they just dropped it. Basically, it's like they dropped the ball on the whole thing.
It's a very ephemeral society. You know that from doing what you do. But it is bizarre. And, I really think that if they announce, well, aliens are real and it's really happening, we're really being visited from other planets, that in 2 or 3 days we'd be going on looking at our smartphones again. And I don't know. It just seems strange like that. And I do agree. It's been very quiet. And we did have some really good momentum. Perhaps we will again. Chad Underwood was a Navy pilot that actually filmed that Tic Tac UFO, and he's spoken out, quite a bit about that. And there's been we had a past guest here, Chris Lato, and he's been going back and forth with Mick West, who was on Mick West, I would classify Mick West as more of a debunker than a skeptic, but someone may disagree with that.
I don't buy any of his logic. Somebody pointed me to a couple of his videos, and he's just, I won't say anymore. I just don't buy much of what he says, truthfully.
Yeah. But anyway, I did want to point out that there is a video out there. I can't pull it up right now, that Chris Leto had with a FLIR expert. And there was so many flaws in what Mick West was saying that, it's really worth watching. So if you go on Chris Leto's YouTube channel, you will see it there. I think it was a few shows ago. He's really putting a hard effort into looking at this topic. And I've been in contact with him since he's been on the show. It's been pretty interesting for him. And more people like that are coming forward and saying, hey, look, you debunkers out there, just don't throw around something if you've never used the equipment before, and just, you don't assume. That's the problem with a lot of debunking is assumptions.
That's my problem too. I don't promote or talk about anything I don't personally use in my business. So if on my channel, The Archer Professor, if I don't use it, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't know how it works. I don't recommend something I've never used either. So when somebody comes out and says, well, this is what I was told, or couch researchers and stuff, it's just pointless. They don't have enough knowledge. And I'm not saying him specifically or anybody. I'm just saying in general, unless you've done it, used it, know how it works, I wouldn't personally talk about it. You can research it online all you want, but it's still not going to be anywhere near actually being able to use it, load it, touch the machine for one,
Yeah. The model you made is white. Was the object, someone asked earlier, was the object actually white, but you said it was sort of glowing?
It was like the moon. It was just bright white, I guess. That was it. This is a little dirty, but yeah.
Yeah. So it was white. And yeah, that is pretty bizarre that it's, what Dave Fravor describes, basically the same, and also Alex Dietrich describes basically seeing that same object.
Well, I found it like 3 other ones and written reports on it. One landed in the desert somewhere. That's, again, I thought they were.
Oh yeah, the Socorro incident. That was more egg-shaped. Yeah, that was kind of more egg-shaped, but yes, that was back in '66, I think I want to say. Could be a little bit early, but I'm pretty sure it was around that era. Yeah, very interesting. And nothing, when it comes to what these people are seeing for objects out there, you don't have to worry about aerodynamics. I guess the disc model is pretty aerodynamic, but it doesn't seem to need that type of thing.
I don't personally, I would say the shape means nothing in my book.
Yeah.
If you can do that with one shape, if they're going through our atmosphere at, 600-700 G's or something, flying at 10, 20, 30,000 miles an hour, if they can traverse that without melting the outside of the ship or, being slowed down or without creating a boom, the shape of the ship means nothing. I think there's the warp bubble that everybody talks about coming into play or something. Maybe the animals can sense things that we can't, and hence that's why there's no sound when they're around. Maybe they sense it. They're not silenced. They're, like just before a storm comes, sometimes all the birds are quiet and stuff like that. So that's what maybe is happening. Is again, animals have senses that we can't comprehend.
Yeah. I remember someone saying they thought it had something to do with the way they travel, the space-time thing, but who knows? I mean, that's all speculation.
Yeah, who knows? Exactly.
Yeah. When this thing, when you saw this thing, and then it all like that, the aftermath, I want to say, was this like all consuming for quite a while for you, or was it something you
I had to go back to work the next day, 10-hour day. So, I mean, it was back to work, maybe 4 or 5 weeks, it was solid in my head constantly. And then it's, it wasn't as important and things were happening, and, it wasn't as much of that. And then by maybe, 5 years down, it was just a story I told once in a while when we were out somewhere, and it didn't occupy my mind much until 2017. And, because what could I do about it? It already had happened years back, even at that point. What could I do? And I had no photos, and, people still ridiculed anybody who said something like that. Don't report it. You'll be laughed at. And, so at that point, what was the sense, I guess? It was 4 minutes or less of my life. And,
yeah. Would you think that object was under intelligent control?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
No question. I have thought about that a lot when it, because it got there, whether it was remote controlled or what, I don't know, but I don't think it came there to see us. That's my point. And I don't think it moved over there. Maybe we surprised, I don't know. Or maybe it knew we were there. Maybe it can see the heat or something. I mean, we had electronics on. I don't know how far a metal detector would be detectable, from a distance, but there was metal detectors on, and, we weren't talking or anything. We were just listening. So, I mean, you don't talk while you're metal detecting. You can't hear the beeps and stuff. So I don't know. I personally don't 100% think it was there to see us. I think maybe when it did see us, it was like, boom. And that was when it left. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't over our heads and right there for more than maybe max 20, 25 seconds at the very, very, very most. I didn't time it or anything, but it wasn't in front of us very long at all.
Yeah. So Dave Altman is connected to a lot of the guys that were in the Nimitz case that had that Tic Tac UFO experience back in 2004. And so he's just offering, if you would like to speak to any of those people, he can connect you to any of them. I also do have their contact information, but Dave has more contacts in that and with those guys than I do. But they're all very interesting. I mean, there's that encounter has really changed a lot. Just that one single encounter, because we're talking military, and there's a lot of military cases but it's not, according, here we go. I'm bringing back Neil deGrasse Tyson again. He says, how come only military people see these things? And, that's
of
not
true.
Ridiculous thing to say.
That's not true. I personally heard the radio conversation from something flying over a whole row of jets, Boeing's, passenger planes, where the first one picked it up, called the tower called and asked the planes behind it, and 2 more planes saw it fly over them in the opposite direction faster than they could, think of. And then there's one at maybe O'Hare Airport or something that punched through.
2007.
It's not just them. I mean, who else is flying all the time? Who else is in these areas at the time? A Air Force jet flies in that same area and does their practice or whatever they're doing, a passenger plane just is going straight back and forth. They're not looking, they're not maneuvering, they're not doing anything. And just like the folks that say, well, why don't we have better photos? From what I understand, there's a photo out there of one of these things 50 feet from the cockpit of one of our jets that still is waiting to be, well, probably
That's
never
right.
will be released. But
Yeah.
you know,
And
so
also, while we're bringing this up, I will tell people, because I mentioned it last week, that I was going to try to reach out to Lou Elizondo and find out about the 23-minute video that he mentioned on the podcast, that he says he expects to come out, and it will be kind of a game changer. There's more than one object in this video, and the report is he did respond through his wife, and he doesn't know exactly when it's going to be released, and he can't divulge anything more than that. And I also want to say that people have been attacking him and in the UFO community, and I think it's kind of ridiculous. He's done nothing but try to move the needle forward, and he's not in it for the money. And I think that's what people are guessing is what's going on, but I don't think there's any of that. I think again, he's going to be on the show in December. We're going to talk more about that. Here's a question. I don't understand this, but ask Don about the video on local TV of his sighting. Did they pick up your video?
The video that I mentioned in there is not, as far as I know, any local channel. We had cable. I don't know where the broadcast, it could have been anywhere in the country. I don't know. It was cable. I mean, I don't think you get any reception back then in Claremont at all back then. I think everything would have been probably some national show. And I honestly asked the wife, because I got bombarded with that question too. It's not something I would have watched back then, whatever show it was. I don't know if it was an Unsolved Mysteries, or I don't even know what the shows would have been called. I've never been a person who watched any of those sort of things, truthfully. I don't watch that. I don't watch TV, and haven't for a few years at all. And we cut the cable. I haven't had cable or anything. My kids grew up with no cable. It's always been internet for my kids, and my oldest is 21. So I don't do TV. I've never been into that kind of stuff. I couldn't tell you the show, but it was on cable in Claremont, Florida at that time. Probably the end of 1990, towards the winter was when it would have been on. And again, I don't know if it was a rerun, which I can't imagine, if it was a first run or what. My friend called me. It was about 10 o'clock at night. I was literally just going to bed. We had to be at the work at 6:30 in the morning. By the time you get there, you had to change clothes at the wardrobe department at Disney, and it was an hour. So you got to get up, what would have been around 5 in the morning. I didn't have time to, I'm never was into that. We worked, we hung out with friends back in those days. TV was the last thing I wanted to do as a 20-year-old, hanging out in Disney in the sun with the beach right there. You know what I mean? It wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Has any, you mentioned some like negative, comments. Are people accusing you of trying to cash in on this? That's the thing that people always seem to
I've
do.
heard a couple people saying he's a con artist and he's this and he's that. If I wanted to con it, I would have put it on my channel with almost 60,000 subscribers. I wouldn't have put it on my small channel, and I would have orchestrated it a little better than I did. I just flick on the microphone for most every show I do. I don't do a lot. Some of my videos I obviously set up ahead of time, but if I'm talking about something, I'm not an orchestrator. I'm not a promoter. I don't promote even my own stuff that I sell. I don't promote my stores. When I do videos on stuff, I'm just talking about the stuff I do. I'm not a promoter. I don't have a bunch of all that stuff. I don't mess with the links. I don't put out guidebooks. I don't charge for services and stuff. The only thing I got is a Patreon page where I put videos up, and that's about it. I'm not into any of that. I'm not a big marketer. I'm not a big advertiser. I'm not looking to waste my time or anybody else's. I put up 2 videos on UFOs, total, I think maybe 38 minutes or something like that over the videos. And that's it. I didn't, one of the videos got a bunch of views. I wasn't monetized at that point, so I got nothing out of it. I am monetized on that channel now since then. But again, I'm not, you're talking pennies. It's not if anything, it could hurt my reputation. I write for the biggest, blog post that covers reselling. I write for them. I do full-time this. I've got employees that rely on me. I've got several businesses we run. I work 12, 14 hours a day. I don't know what the heck I would get out of this, in all honesty. I've even had people say, why don't you make those to sell, the UFOs? I'm not interested in that. That's not what I do. I don't know what I could potentially get out of this. So when I got a couple people saying that, I'm like, again, I've heard all kinds of stuff just in reselling stuff. I get all kinds of crazy comments. So it's a whole different group of people that hit you up on this aspect, though.
Yeah. I mean, when I jumped from, I still do find out. I'm a very busy find out appraiser right now. But when I kind of jumped into this thing, it was at a time that was different. And then now it's a little bit more accepted now. I'm not so afraid to talk about it now. But, when I first started doing this back in 2011, I just got a fantastic job, that was very well compensated and all that. And I had to be a professional going into homes and things like that. And I was concerned about this topic, so about me being associated with it. So, and there was some backlash that I did get.
See, that's what I worried about too, because if I go and I've got my paperwork in for, the PhD program in American Cultural Studies, and I don't want them to think I'm some quack. And I know I don't think that about a lot of people, but you never know with the thing. So I waited 1.5 years to put those videos up, and only because I promised, and I'm not going to say sick of it, but I got a lot of people that had asked me over the year or so since I first brought it up, just some random comment on a show. And then that, has set it off from there. And I was honestly nervous just to put the video up, because I was just waiting for the attack. And I'm like, we were attacked once before, as I was telling you, and I wasn't looking forward to being attacked. But again, I try, if I say something, I try to go through with it. And I procrastinated a very long time before I did it, just because, again, I was nervous and I didn't want to bring a whole bunch of hate coming to our house. Since I put that up, I have been contacted people, but you're the only one that I've responded to. Even the local newspaper hit me up, including a national newspaper and a national TV channel hit me up too, a national news thing. I haven't responded to any of those. I'm not trying to, again, I don't, this isn't my living. I do something totally different. I'm not.
Yeah. I would like to announce that the lines are open. And if you'd like to call in and ask our guest a question, that number is 855-472-5483. Bill is standing by, and your calls are welcome tonight. And let's just see. Also, if you don't want to actually call, but you'd like to ask a question, I do ask you that if you ask a question in chat, that you will put it in all caps so it catches my eye. A lot of times they'll fly by, especially when there's a number of people in here. So let me ask you this: what, to you, there's the term disclosure, and what would you feel like? Would you feel like, I'm sorry, let me rephrase it this way: what do you consider would be like the government disclosure on the UFO topic? If
releasing everything they have. Other than the stuff that might put some of our technology in jeopardy. I don't want any things that could. Part of the reason I heard some of the stuff wasn't released on some of these is because of the sensor technology underwater, and we've got some new advanced technology. They don't want to give it away. I understand that. But a photo taken from a cockpit 50 feet away, I don't know how that could violate or expose technology that we would have. I think they know what's going on. I think they should just be able to put out all the basic stuff. Too many people have seen stuff. Too many people, educated people who know enough between, fantasy and reality, have come out and said things that just level with us. I understand that they worry about like mass hysteria and things like that. I've taken some PR classes in college and things like that too. So I understand that aspect of it, but for the most part, I think that the majority of the population of the country is ready to hear what is going out there. I've seen the surveys, and I know surveys can go either way, but I've seen enough surveys. I've heard enough comments. Before I die, that's the only thing I really would say, that I would like to know, what it is. That's the only deciding factor. And I think, again, as you said, and we said earlier, that they have more information. again, maybe they can't say what it is, but they know more than what they have. They have
Yeah.
to have some ideas, and the ideas leaning, in my book, from what I've heard some folks say, would pretty much knock off Russia and China from even being on the list of potential possibilities.
Yeah, and they may have that the Congress, I mean that group, the intelligence group there that they assembled, may have been briefed on more than they're letting us know.
I fully believe that too, because Lou Alessandro, his in my thing, he's doing the right thing by addressing it, because if something can weave in and out of our airspace, can fly between jets and do risky maneuvers through private jets, or a jumbo jet with 300 passengers on it, that is a security and safety issue, if nothing else, for us if we're flying in a plane. And to blow it off for all these years, again, maybe they're not blowing it off. Maybe they know and have been investigating this, and they just don't want to say. And there's some black ops program that's been trying to figure this out. I know I heard the Skunks Works and all that kind of stuff, or To the Stars Academy or whatever. But my other thinking on this too is I looked into how would they cover this up. They just, in my book, they've turned over a lot of this to private industry, because there's no way for anybody to get the information. The Freedom of Information Act doesn't apply to any of that. So again, there could be more out there. I'm skeptical. They have a lot. I think they're really in the dark on some of it, but they've got a preponderance of evidence to show that there is something there. They're just afraid to admit it, because then they would admit that there's something flying in and out of space and they can't stop them.
Right. Well, we had my friend from Colombia, South America. I've been in touch with him over the years. He was on the line, but it looks like we lost him. So that line is open. Hopefully, Garrett, you'll call back, 855-472-5483. I think he's actually calling from South America. That's maybe why. I thought you were in the States, Garrett. I thought you came back. But anyway, the lines are open. Feel free to call, and would love to hear you. And if you call back, Garrett, I'll bring you right up. Someone said they didn't want to interrupt the interview with the call, but no, we want your calls. So please do call in. It's always the reason, some people say, why do you take calls? It's annoying. I don't think it is, because I can't think of all the right questions to ask. And some of the callers can really have some excellent questions. So we're waiting for you to give a call. And do you think you'll, if someone else asks you to talk about this, do you think you'll talk about it more? On other shows, or does it...
Literally, my life, I work a lot. I'm getting older. I've have vertical diplopia with blur in one eye, and I've got some issues. I don't know what going forward. I'm more worried about making sure that if I do go blind an eye or something else happens, that I'm able to get the business even farther away, so farther growing and stuff. Most of my time and effort goes into that. As I said, if you weren't an antique dealer, I don't know, if I would have just, and somebody who I know knew who you were. So that's one of the other reasons. But maybe, I don't know. I'm not really sure on how I feel about that. Well, I guess we'll see after this show if I take a lot of grief or you do or something else, how I'll feel after that. But again, this wasn't something that was looking to say, hey, let me go talk about a bunch of UFOs or something. I'd even thought about doing more videos on it, but I don't have the time. I barely put up videos on my other channel, the smaller channel as it is. And I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Yeah. It is, I think what the most interesting aspect of this is that a lot of people were talking about, 2004, this Tic Tac shape. It really hasn't, and someone I know mentioned on the little clip that I played that there are hundreds of other, accounts of these. I'm not familiar with them, but anyway, we have someone on the line right now. We have Rob calling from Pennsylvania. Rob, welcome to the show. You're live.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Thanks for being on the show, Don.
How you doing, Rob?
I just was wondering, I didn't catch all of the show. This vehicle that you saw, were you near water or was it over water? Where was where was the closest body of water? And
Less than a mile away.
less than a mile away. And did anybody that you were with, were any of them unable to see it?
No, there was just two of us, and we both saw it. My friend is the one who got my attention. I didn't see it until he tapped me and kept bugging me on it. I mean, I was literally crouched down on my knees when he first saw it. I don't even know where he was, until he came up to me, because when you're out, you're just following wherever the detector goes. I wasn't like worrying about him. I was worried about the signal. So he saw it. We both saw the exact same thing. He brought my attention to it, though.
Very good. Okay.
That
Well,
is
thank
actually a good question, because people have said, I've seen different things. It's bizarre, Anyway, but you have something else, Rob?
No, that's everything. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So the line is open, and Garrett just wrote me through text saying he just wanted to say hi, but maybe he'll call in next week. But so anyway, going back to what I was saying, you have an account much earlier than and the Socorro case. That was more of an egg shape, but you have something that looked exactly like David Fravor and Alex Dietrich and the other ones that saw it. And people have actually saw it from a distance on the ship. They have these, very high power binoculars. And some people, there were a few witnesses that saw it that way too. There were several of them.
Well, might I say one more thing?
Yeah.
My other assumption too, from a distance, I'm just looking at the head on of this thing. So it's just some little ball bouncing around from a distance. So maybe a bunch of people have seen it and they don't realize that it's not just some little ball bouncing around in the sky. That would be my other thought on that. Maybe they come in different sizes too. Who knows? I mean, if they can make one, they can make, probably a whole bunch of them, would be my thought.
Yeah. Yeah. And, at one time, Kevin Day was saying these things were raining down. He didn't even want to guess how many there were. We have another caller. Greg is on the line from North Carolina. Greg, welcome to the show. You're live.
Hi, Martin.
Hi.
Hi, Don.
How you doing?
How are you? Good. I had just a comment or a little bit of a story, if you can entertain me here for a second. But the one of the websites that was associated with your podcast UFO, Martin,
Yeah.
called Faded Discs, and they
Yes.
have New Fork recordings,
Yes.
National UFO Reporting Center. I happened to be listening to some of those, and I listened to one today, and it was from, I think, 1976. And it was a helicopter pilot who had called in, and there were four pilots actually on this helicopter, and it had an object that came at them and then circled around them, and they described it as egg-shaped, and it was about 10 feet long and about 4 feet wide, and it sounded very similar to the TicTac, or the one that Don you saw. And this is from 1976, and what this object did was circle the helicopter while it was flying, and it came within like 50 feet of it. The one pilot said he finally opened the door so he could get a better look at it. But
Now,
when he described it, it just sounded like this kind of TicTac UFO.
Are you talking about the coin incident? Does that ring a bell? That was actually
It does ring a bell, but I don't.
1973. And that was over Ohio, I believe. Can't remember exactly where that was.
Yeah, that does ring a bell. I don't think this was the same one, because I think this was out on the West Coast.
Okay.
And the recordings are from, I think, 75, 76, and 77. And the fella said they just returned to the airport and he called it in.
Yeah.
So I believe it happened.
Yeah. No, I believe you're probably right. I just have not heard of that one. incident in particular was drawn up toward the object. They went to a really high altitude all of a sudden, where they were in panic mode, wondering what to do.
Right.
But,
Yep.
no one talked about opening a door.
Yeah. No. This didn't happen. The object just came around them. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to relay that story because it kind of relates to that, what you're talking about today. But then I just wanted to see if Don would maybe speculate or explain a little further about when you first saw the object and the way it was bouncing around. And I think, Don, you mentioned that it looked like maybe it was contained in some way.
Yeah, I would definitely say it didn't go farther to the right or farther than the left than like a small little area. It was literally stuck in there, but it was freely moving just almost randomly in that section there. Like it was skipping on something is what I would relate it to. As I said, I related it to back then to, I guess it's a parachute test tube or something you'd call it. And that's literally what it reminded me of right after I thought about it. Because when you're in there, it was just, you're stuck and you're literally like floating and bouncing. And it was just, a fan, the fan tube, whatever they're called. And that's what it did, like a skipping stone, like it was almost, I had the feeling like there was like almost like matter underneath it and it was holding it up. It kind of reminded me of, I know it probably wasn't, but that's like there's a cushion of air under it almost, I guess would be the point.
Right.
It didn't have like a trajectory or anything like that. It was just all over the place.
Oh, yeah. Greg, hey, thanks for the call.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you.
All right, take care. Next, we have Rob calling from the same state, from Florida. Rob, welcome to the show. You're live.
Good evening, Martin. Rob from Florida, but Rob's in Nashville, and I changed time zones, so I missed the opening of the show. But, Don, thank you for bringing your account forward. And I missed the part, where in the Panhandle where you were? And the second part of my question is, did you feel any kind of tingling psychological effects? I apologize if you went over that. Over.
It was like 6 miles south of St. Mark's, which is a historical place. It's been there since I think like 1690 or so. I didn't feel anything or anything. There was no sense tingling or nothing else. I mean, my hair may have stood up for a moment, possibly. I don't know. That's possible because I was totally, I don't know, in awe or lost for thought on what could possibly be up there. I mean, it defied my understanding of what could happen, I guess, at that point. It like somebody opened a door and showed me something I shouldn't see or something like that, I guess.
And you say you're about a mile away.
When we first saw it, yes, it was probably a mile, maybe less. I mean, I can't say for sure. I mean, all you can see is the woods, the trees going on forever, so I couldn't tell. It was up above all that, so and it's off in a distance, I guess maybe a mile or less. I don't know. If it's close, I can judge the distance, but
sure.
Yeah.
Well, pay no attention to the critics, and again, thanks for bringing it forward. And good show, Martin. Always a pleasure.
All right. Hey, thank you for your call. And we only have about 5 minutes or so left here. So probably, I mean, if someone wants to call real quickly, we can fit you in. But other than that, we're going to move on. Geez, I had a question just a second ago that it was about the object itself. Did you think that, and I did ask you already if you thought it was under intelligent control. You mentioned that you could not figure out a way that anything could get inside it. There was no seams or
I didn't see anything.
Apparent. But but I also have heard people talk about these things, and all of a sudden something opens with no seam. It just plain opens. But,
well, like the appendages on the bottom. That's why I say I don't remember seeing them when I first saw it pop up there. But when it turned to take off or move or disappear, that's when I saw them. I mean, if they weren't there at first, they appeared from nowhere, I guess you would say, because I didn't see any openings before it. And maybe they were there the whole time, and I was just spaced with what was going on. I don't know, but I don't think they were. Yeah. I think they weren't there when it first got there is what I'm thinking. Again, I can't, it was just a 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds worth of the view of it. And the first few seconds was just me trying to comprehend what was there. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, it's right here. And it's solid. It's not what I thought it was, because we were looking at a ball bouncing around, and what's right here in front of me isn't a ball. That was, I guess, puzzling on top of it, because it wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't some little orb thing. It was a 25 or 30 foot thing sitting up there that didn't match what I thought it was. And on top of the lack of sound and no propulsion, I think the weirdest thing is something sitting in midair that's not moving with anything. I mean, nothing.
Everything.
A helicopter,
everything. Yeah.
Well, like a helicopter moves a little bit. It's not 100%. This thing was like it was totally frozen in mid movement. It was just sitting there, not moving. It was like a mounted stationary object. It just didn't. I don't know how to say it other than that. It wasn't moving at all, not even a millimeter. It was just there in one single spot.
It's
I don't know
how you say that, because when I had my UFO sighting, which was not anywhere near dramatic as yours, but that really puzzled me too, because when it stopped, it like stopped, and there was like no movement at all. It just plain stopped before it started again. We have one more caller. Chad is calling from Kentucky. Welcome to the show, Chad. You're live. Chad, are you there?
Thanks, Martin.
You are there.
Martin, it's Chad from the Basement Hangout. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. Chad, hey, I did give you a shout out. I don't know if you heard it. Chad, are you there? Now, this is someone that has their own show, their podcast. I was on last week.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, there's been an interesting with Kaz Clark, where she thought that it was actually potentially organic.
Chad, are you on speakerphone?
What you experienced was actually organic and not nuts and bolts crap.
All right, go ahead.
Do I think it was organic?
Yeah.
I have to think it's mechanical, truthfully, but that's just my thought on it. Only just by the shape alone, I guess I would say, and movement, and the fact that it could just freeze there. It just seems to me that it's a vehicle. Again, I've heard them describe it as a drone. In fact, there was a report on the news the other day about some helicopter chasing some drone that could stay in air for some horrendous amount of time, and it sounded just like a UFO report. But I have to think it wasn't organic at all. Truthfully, I didn't even think of that option. Truthfully, it just instantly struck me as a vehicle.
Yeah, Chad, thanks for the call. And I did give a shout out. I told people to listen to the podcast. So anyway, thanks for the call, Chad. And that is not an unusual question. For the fact that some people have had the feeling that these things are organic and living, which is totally bizarre. I know it's hard to even comprehend, but there's so many mysteries to this story. Anyway, to begin with,
I wouldn't rule it out, but from my personal feeling, I think it was manned of some sort. That would be, or operated a vehicle. It wasn't like a thing in itself. Was my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Again, I could be wrong. I don't know. I have no answer on that one, honestly. No one's ever even brought that up, so that's an interesting one.
All right. Well, Don, you've been great. It's really an amazing account, and I do thank you for coming forward and talking about it. Very interesting. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me on.
All right. Okay. You take care. All right, everyone. So we will be back next week. We have my friend Mark D'Antonio, who will also be in Pine Bush, and we have Ted Rowe from NARCAP. It should be a great show next week, and I hope to see you there. And also, I think that it seems like there was one more thing to talk about, but I think I do want to just say, make sure you check out our blog this week. Audio blogs come out on Fridays, and we'll see you next week. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.